Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Welcome all new listeners and welcome back to those who have heard my content in the past. If you want to know how not to be a let's see how it goes type of a PT, this episode is perfect for you. Welcome back, everyone, to the podcast. Before I go on to the topic and why let's see how it goes PT is a bad thing or not so great thing, I'll share that soon. But before I go into the podcast, what is new in life? What is on the brain and what is happening in real life? A couple good things and a couple not so good things. I'll start with the not so good. My computer broke. There's always something being thrown at you in life. My team will always know this, that I feel like you always have plans and life just kind of hits you with it, and that's just everything behind it, and you almost have to be ready for it. And so my computer broke. So I am working off of my wife's computer at the moment. Just learn life lessons. Be patient. The kids are good. My son Jacob is almost walking. He is like so close. And my son Zach. If you guys follow me on media, my son Zach is almost going to be 6. It's amazing to watch kids grow, and I'm amazed that every day that he grows up. Yesterday, he asked me a good question. He said, "Hey, Dad, what would you do if an elephant was attacking you? Would you hide behind a rock, or would you try and find somewhere underground?" And I couldn't understand the question, but he knew what he wanted, and ultimately he said both were wrong. So I don't know if he had his own answer or what it was, but he said, "Don't hide behind a rock because it can chase you, and it'll stomp on you if you're underground." But another thing that I'm celebrating, and for those of you who heard a couple of my older episodes, I was raised by my grandmother, and she was near and dear to my heart. And she passed the day after my PT, or the week after my graduating PT school, and that was a big thing for her. And so today is 14 years in celebrating her life. So great day, amazing day. All right, on to this podcast. What is a let's see how it goes PT, and why are we talking about this? All right. So this came up during my accelerator course in March of 2022. A few of the PTs that were in the course, they were asking, how do you get prepared? How do you know? How do you become experienced without the experience? And I said, one of the first things that you can do is not be a let's see how it goes PT. And they're like, well, what is that? And I would say it's about a large portion of people who get into practice and really don't care about their craft, or they don't necessarily prepare. So they show up on Monday and they arrive and they look at their patient list or their athlete list, and there was really no thought in their plans of care, in their programs, in their HEPs, in their Therex, and their corrective exercises, on their rehab progressions. It was like they showed up, they were like, oh, I didn't realize I had those 2 people. Oh, I didn't even know I had a progress note. Oh, I didn't know I had a Medicare documentation. I didn't know any of this. And then that's usually compounded with, oh, I had a rough night last night. I was a little stuffy and I couldn't sleep. And I woke up this morning with a flat tire, and I was 6 minutes late to an initial evaluation, and I had this documentation. Can you believe this world? It's so hard, when all of that was preventable to some extent, in that you were prepared and you were ready for it. So a let's see how it goes type of a PT is somebody who literally doesn't prepare and shows up to work and expects things to just work out. And it rarely does. And if it does, it's such at a low productivity, such a low output, that it's not even positive. It's not a good thing. You can see it. It's like complacency. It's a really tough word to absorb. But that's the discussion we were having. And I said, how do you get more experience without the experience? This. Don't be a let's see how it goes PT. And I have some great stories behind this. I want to be able to help you figure out. Most clinicians are trying to get to either expert status or specialist status without having to put in 20, 30 years of work. How do I expedite that? And not necessarily just to bypass the things, but honestly to serve athletes and patients better, right? You want better outcomes. And ultimately, you're going to have to work through some of these. This is also what I share with my staff, my team at Sports Performance. And, I really advocate you just can't be the let's see how it goes type of PT, because at a certain point, especially when you work with pro athletes or elite athletes, that you have to understand they have a certain expectation. You will not survive in the pro or elite world without uh, without any form of preparation. And if you do, you probably won't last. And that's what I learned. And this applies to all roles, right? So it's not just like PTs, but whether you're a manager or you're a coach, or it doesn't matter. It's all the same. But specific to PTs, this was very this was a very big moment for me early in my career. And let me tell you why. When I wanted to get into residency, I had to distinguish myself before other people, and I really had to figure out, how do I get this one spot in the residency? And ultimately, it required that I had to do a lot of front end work to learn about the program, so I could essentially show them exactly how I'm going to fit in that, and I would surpass their metrics, their goals, and I would be a great ambassador for their company. And so I had to do a lot of that work on the front end. So when I got in, I was really excited, but I realized, oh my goodness, that's just the start, because now I have people watching me. And now if I'm mediocre and I come in as a let's see how it goes, I'm not going to distinguish myself from anybody. And I'm just going to look like every other PT that they've ever seen. And I knew that I didn't want that. I wanted something different. That's just my life. I wanted to surpass people's expectations. Why? It's just my nature. It's something deep inside that I can't I can't let it go. And for those of you who knew, I was illiterate up until the end of high school, and college is where I learned to read and write. And so like every portion of me has been fighting to like one, catch up with everybody. Then it just kept going. The momentum just kept going. I was like, now how do I stay ahead of everybody? And PT school is where I kind of learned to kickstart that a little bit more, and the residency just like skyrocketed me. So when I went into pro sports, I learned that it's actually the standard that you're prepped and ready, because these people have high expectations. They're being paid a lot of money. It's their career. Their body is their career. And if you're not fine tuning that thing and you're not staying ahead of the game, you won't last. So because of that, I've learned it. I don't want you guys to do it. That's just, if there's tips that I can give you, don't do what everybody else is doing. If everybody's going left, you go right. I'm telling you this because I've seen it. I've worked in it. I've worked in recruiting. I've worked in admission committees. I've worked on all sides of selection processes for either employees, for staff, for teams, for athletes, for PT school. And the qualities, there's very similar qualities. And this quality of let's see how it goes PT is very apparent. And it will be very apparent, and you will not be able to last. So I'm trying to prepare you. If you're a student listening to this, perfect. You're ahead of the game. If you're a clinician, new grad, just a couple years out, you need to make a change now before you become complacent, because it's very difficult to change that lifestyle once it's already ingrained in you. So the definition is somebody who is complacent, somebody who doesn't prepare, and somebody who has regularly the deer in the headlights look. They show up to work, they're like, they see the stack of papers, they see the number of athletes and patients in front of them, and they're like, oh, I wasn't expecting all of that. Yeah, that's because you didn't prepare. So that's your fault. So that is the definition. Deer in the headlights. That's an easy way to see that. So why is it bad? Here's a quote, and this is from somebody I've worked with in the past. I've heard this several times with PTs. I've heard this before, so listen up closely. This comes from somebody who has practiced for 5 to 8 years, right? They say, Chris, after listening to your content, going to your courses, being mentored by you, one of the biggest things I learned, I've been practicing, 8 years. And what I learned is I really haven't been practicing for 8 years. I've been practicing for 1 year, 8 times. If you really process that, which what he meant was, I haven't been growing for 8 years in a row. I've been doing the same thing year after year for 8 years. So he said, I've been a PT 1 year, 8 times versus practicing for 8 years. Big difference. And it's these people who they come to the realization later on that if you're early in your practice, you got to make these changes now. And the other point to that is if you are on the back end of that and you've been practicing 5 to 10 years, there's still hope. You don't have to rely on just time to fix it, or you're like, it's too late for me. I don't really care anymore. I'm just going to show up to work and be a let's see how it goes PT. Nonetheless, if you're listening to this, you're really trying to advance your career. So I want to help. So here's some concepts. Okay. Uh, how does this impact athletes and patient care? 100%. It is going to impact negatively your outcomes. So if you have, maybe you're really good at rotator cuff repair, a rehab, maybe you're really good at ACLs, maybe you're like the expert on slap repairs, whatever that is. Every case is different, and that's the truth. And what you really have to do is, say, for instance, you have, throw out a random number, 10. You have 10 people on your schedule today, or tomorrow, excuse me. And you know it's 7 o'clock at night, the night before, and you're exhausted, right? So you have to do paperwork, everything else. One of the first things I tell people to do, just take a quick glance, right? Like right when you finish the documentation, take a quick glance of the people you have for tomorrow, and then pick 1 to 2 people who potentially can be problem childs, meaning they can go both directions, and you know that they're not going towards the plan of care that you set, whether that's outcomes or they're not committed, whatever it is. You know that there's going to be people who are going the opposite direction that you want. If that's the case, you need a plan and prep. Now, what I mean by that is it doesn't mean that you need to go extravagant and make this whole program for them, go on YouTube and watch all these videos. What I'm saying is just that thought right off the top, already you start formulating, all right, what am I going to do if they do, insert challenges? That is a small game changer. One of the first things you can do, look at your schedule the night before, right? Just mentally prep. What is that going to be? Then, like most people, some of the best ideas come when you are not thinking about the thing. So for instance, some of the best ideas I get, I'm like, in the shower, right? You're just like, think about life. You're like, I'm literally wash my hair. I'm like, oh yeah, that's the 2 things that I needed to get done today. Let me remember that. When you already planted that seed, you're going to be so much more productive versus you remembered right when you got to work. Then all the chaos happens. You have no more time to think. The problem is that we don't focus on planning when there's nothing to do. You only think about planning when you have to. And that's when there's no ideas, there's no time. It's already too late. So put that seed in your head early on. And the second place where I get most of my ideas from is when I'm driving to work. It's like you're like looking at, whatever, the road and you see random things. You're like, those are the things I wanted to add in. I'll add in those 2 exercises. What I'm saying is you drop a couple seeds in your head, let that marinate, let that grow, and they'll blossom at the right times. So you plant the seed the night before, right after you get out of work, go home, forget about everything else. It'll come up back in your head. You'll have preparation. Now, where do you make the most gain? On the weekends. Now, a lot of people don't like to hear that. They're like, it's my time. Totally get it. Totally get it. It is. But if you don't, it's going to be tough to be a progressive, motivated, productive healthcare provider or clinician. Why? Because there's not enough time in the week to get great at what you do. And the challenge is you're going to have to put time and effort. Now, there's always time. You just got to figure out how to allocate better. So what I mean by that is it might take you on the weekends getting up 5 a.m. I don't know, work for an hour, do whatever it is. Maybe it's you on a one night during the week where you spend 2 hours and it's your growth period. I need to look at 5 articles, research these things, but I'm going to batch it, meaning I'm only going to spend these 2 hours and I'm done. So you can do your Sunday at midday, go to a coffee shop, for 2-3 hours, you're going to focus on this. And then, during the week, you don't have to do so much, but you're going to have to allocate time to dedicate towards your growth, because most of the week, think about this, most of the week is done on like the operational stuff. Like you're doing the notes, you're doing this, you're doing the treatment, you're doing all the programming. most of the growth happens when you're not doing the operational stuff. So, such as when the brain is turned off. So, at night, on the weekends is where it's like turned off and it's actually productive. That's where your growth work happens. So it's not just the reflection right after the case, it's now implementation. If you're not writing stuff down, if you're not reading, writing, verbalizing anything that you're learning, it won't stick. And maybe you've heard that in different capacities, but think about that. If you are not like explaining it to somebody, which is teaching, writing it down, which is learning, or verbalizing that in any form of fashion. Like you're listening to it, you listen to the podcast, now you got to verbalize it or write it. That's when it's going to be ingrained. So if you're hoping that a podcast purely does everything you want it to, you have to be either verbalizing that or writing that down somewhere. So all the content I'm telling you, you just have to take away one pearl. Whatever podcast you're listening to, whatever you're watching, you just need to take away one thing to make it worth your time to be able to implement and change your practice. I highly recommend that. Okay. So how does it impact athletes and patients? It's definitely your outcomes. They're going to get better. They're going to realize that, and you're going to come with new energy. I promise you, weekly. You know somebody in your clinic or your facility who you can name as like, they just don't turn it off. They don't stop. They just, they motivate you. But at the same time, it's like, how do you do that? I mean, everybody's lifestyle is different depending on where you are in your practice. And maybe you're married with kids and you're busy in life and whatever it is, whatever excuse you want to do, but you're going to have to allocate time and batch that. I have 3 kids. I have my dog and my wife. We got 12 team members at Sports Performance. And, life is as crazy as it's going to get. My computer broke and there's always something, and you always have to find time to allocate towards, there's always time you can do it towards your growth mode. And so I like to batch my time. And so that's highly what I recommend. I do it personally, and it's what I recommend to my team and my staff at Sports Performance. And I promise you that. So the first thing it's going to do is improve your patient and your athlete outcomes. Number one, first and foremost, the people you serve. Number two is your professional reputation. Because I just mentioned that you probably can think of one person inside your facility who is very motivated, and it's clear that they love what they do. And that sticks with you because you're like, I mean, I admire that. I don't have the time. I can't do that. But you can be like that. You don't need to be like anybody else but yourself. And ultimately, once you allocate time, you just need to be the best version of yourself within your like time frame in life. Because maybe when you were new grad, you didn't have a lot of personal commitments and you had all this time. Maybe you're investing a lot of time in yourself, and maybe now you're busier and it's harder for you to do that. But are you the best version of yourself? Are you doing everything you possibly can within the time frames that you want to allocate to get better? And if you say no, great. What version of you do you need to be? So for some people, it's like, man, I just need maybe an hour. I just need an hour of doing some research, work on my programming. What's the flavor of the week? What's the flavor of the month? I'm really struggling with ankle pain. I'm really struggling with knee pain. And you might say, well, Chris, I maybe during my lunch hour I can do it. There's a lot of chaos during the lunch hour, especially if you're doing it at work, you're doing paperwork, you check the emails, you went to social media, you went to my YouTube, you went to my Instagram, you went to all these other things, and ultimately it distracts you, and that's not growth. That's just buying time, and you're just filling brain space, but you're not really doing anything. It's just in one side out the other. So I would not recommend it at work or somewhere where you can be easily distracted. Okay. All right. So we know it's for the people you serve. It's going to improve your outcomes. Number two, it's going to develop you as a person, reputation, and your employer is going to notice that. I mean, I promise you, I can tell you when I see team members doing this, I see the staff, I like see they're putting in time and effort and work. They notice that, and that goes a long way with your professional development, everything else. So how do you improve this? It's for them, it's for you. How do you improve this? Number one, I said, look at the schedule ahead, night before, whatever that may be. Review tough cases at night or on the weekend. Number three, I think you can partner with people and be like, hey, listen, can you keep me accountable? Would you be open to, meeting Saturday mornings, 9 a.m.s? We'll do some coffee, and maybe we work out together, and then for an hour, can we go through some articles, can we go through cases? You're having challenges with that. I am too. Are you open to that? I think that fires people up. I think we all need accountability, and internally you'll go so far, and naturally you veer off. Like for the same reason, you can think of yourself that you were on a diet and that fell off. You were at the gym and that fell off. You were doing running and that fell off. Like there's phases of your life you've never been able to stick with one thing very consistently. We're all human, so for that reason, might be nice to get some accountability. And number four, you got to care. This sounds really bad and basic, but you got to care. And do you remember when you were in PT school or you wanted to get into PT school and how much you cared about the profession? You're like, oh, I'm going to conquer the world. I'm going to change people's lives. This is what I need to do. This is my career. And then you got into PT school, you did well, and you're like, I'm still going to conquer the world. And then you got into real life practice and you're like, oh, some people don't want to get better. Insurance, limits what I can do. Maybe my employer limits how much I can do here. Or they push me one direction. They don't allow me to do what I want. Then there's so many barriers. And then you start to care less because either you don't feel valued, there's a block to your professional growth. You need to like start that fire. I don't care who you are, what settings you're at. You're allowing other people to control your destiny and what you do and your passion. I think that's a fault on your part. I think at some point you have to realize it's your fire, it's your party, it's your life and your personal enjoyment. You can invite whoever you want to that party. So you need to make sure that you stay fulfilled, that you love what you do, and that you have that fire still lit under your butt. And if you're not, that's your fault. Nobody else's. Don't blame it on your employer. Change it, move it, talk to them, get your coworkers fired up, start a group for accountability to meet on Saturdays, or I don't know, start a journal club on Tuesdays during lunch. I don't care. That's your challenge. You're going to continue to fight the challenge until you solve that. And there's a phrase that we use here at Sports Performance within team members. You get what you tolerate. And internally, if you're battling that, you're going to get what you tolerate until you get sick of it. And, it's too late. And I don't want that for you. It really disappoints me when people are complacent with a profession. That means that it took a long time to get there and you allowed it to get there, right? That's like, how do you solve type 2 diabetes? You exercise and prevent it, right? Like it's always in the prevention. So if somebody's complacent, they're tired of the profession, how did it get that point? Like, why didn't you exercise and beat type 2 diabetes? Why didn't you work towards developing your career, keeping the fire going? What happened that allowed you to get to that point? And I'm not, don't be offended by that. I'm speaking for the heart. This is a conversation that I have with anybody that I mentor. The reality is that you have to look inside and figure out what it is that you truly care about. And do you still care about your community? And don't lose sight of that, because it's not about knees and ankles and home exercise programs and the McKenzie method and mobilizations. It's about people. And if you're losing that passion, the people are the ones that take the hit. So don't do that. All right. And ultimately, what does this do for you? Like, so what does this mean for me? One, your internal validation of what you're doing stays high. Right? Like no matter what, you get joy out of going to work. You feel valued. It's fulfillment. You're happy. Great. You get that back. For some of you listening to this podcast, I know you're not happy at work. That's why you're seeking, advice and support to figure out how to like better mobilize and better. No, it has nothing to do with that. For some of you, it's just a kick in the pants to figure out that you still got to care about what you do. And then number two, one, it lights a fire underneath you. Number two, it gives you recognition from I think we all look for some form of validation that we're doing a good job, right? Because that creates happiness within us. So most people seek happiness and fulfillment through growth, right? So like they read a book, they want to get a CSCS, a certification, and they feel successful, and that gives them happiness. So the reality is recognition, external recognition and internal recognition is really what drives a lot of us. And no matter what, that will always be. I think like my kids always look to me and like, Dad, did I do a good job? Absolutely, you did a great job. They're looking for like that external support. So number one, you'll get the internal recognition to yourself. All right, is this for me? Just remember that. Number two, you'll get the external recognition. And you know what that opens up? Other doors. More people want to be like you. That opens the door for you to be a mentor, a leader within your clinic, whatever it is. If you want a different job, your job satisfaction's not there, you want a high profile job, you want professional sports, all these variables are going to come from not being let's see how it goes PT, believe it or not. literally, if you can plan ahead, if you can review tough cases, you can invest in yourself in the evenings, in the weekends, and show that you care, it'll light fires around everybody else around you. And it's magnetic because they're like, what are you doing differently? What's the sauce you're like? What are you drinking? And literally it comes down to, I'm just caring about, I relit the fire. So if you can stay true to this, and you might have to listen to this at different points in your professional career, whenever you're listening to this is May 27th, 2022, when I record this. And ultimately you have to remember what it is that you do and why. And I am constantly reminding myself of that. And it takes a lot, believe it or not, to stay at that level, because you just get so like down in the weeds with the daily grind. People, insurance and employers and coworkers, they all bring you down, and Instagram's telling you this and blah, 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 blah. It's hard to stay high because the world is just chaotic around you. The computer's going to crash, your car is going to break down, the tires are going to go out. Literally, it's like, why am I doing this again? To help people. And this is why I want to get into the profession. So friendly reminder, how not to be a let's see how it goes PT. For those of you who are interested on like a higher level of how do I not become that? For some of you, it's a skill-based challenge. Like, I don't know how to prepare for insert the problem. So if you've listened to my podcast or been to my course in the past, I have 3 sections that I really segment your professional development. Number 1 is the acute care side, acute injuries, right? So not necessarily like spine boarding and on-field trauma, which that is one side of the spectrum. I'm saying like things that you would typically see in the clinic. So fresh ankle sprains, shoulder dislocations within the first 2 weeks, disc herniations within 72 hours, acute injuries that we typically, as a profession, I think we're a 4-week to 12-week specialty. Like, that's just who we are, because of the nature of insurance, urgent cares, emergency centers, whatever it is. So seeing people within the first 2 weeks of an injury, that's a different style of treatment, a whole different framework. If you haven't taken my accelerator course, you need to. That is the whole framework on how to manage acute injuries. Then there's the 4-week to 12-week specialty. I think that like there's plenty of content courses for that. There's plenty of things that you can do to develop that. And I think you guys have a good handle on that. And then there's the other side of the spectrum. What if they're out of pain and I want to bridge them into athletic performance? I want to get them into a strength program. I wanted to get them into a wellness program, because I know that if they go back out there, yes, their pain's gone, but they're so weak and they don't have the great movement quality. They're just going to get hurt again. Like, what about those people where you're like, you're going to hurt yourself again? Learning how to build strength programs so that way people can bridge the gap from rehab into performance. Like, what type of framework do you use for strength and conditioning? What are the parameters? Do you just do 3 sets? Do you do 5 sets? Do you do 1-week blocks? Do you do 4-week blocks? How many times do you train them? Is your reps ascending, descending? Is it linear? Is it undulating? What do I do with strength training? Do I have to get a CSCS? And for those people, I created a course, and that's upcoming here in July 23rd, 24th, called the Strength and Conditioning Summit for Physical Therapists. And ultimately, it's to help people with that last portion. So if you struggle with the acute management, you highly recommend take my accelerator course. If you're like, hey, I want to help people at the end stage of rehab, I love transitioning them. I just truly want to make an impact. We don't have anything like that in my clinic. I want to develop that for myself, but then also for the team and the company. This is a great course for you. And this is where, if you're a let's see how it goes PT only because you don't have the skill set in that, I totally get that. That's a different world. You have to develop those skills, go to those courses. And so that's why I'm creating that. So if that's the case for you, perfect, attend that. And if you want information, go to my mailing list. If not, send me an email, drchris at drchrisgarcia.com. Follow me on Instagram, Chris Garcia DPT. Whatever it is, just make sure you're taking care of your peoples. Your community is everything, their life. And they are that's part of you. And don't lose your passion. Don't be complacent. Don't become a let's see how it goes PT. And that is how you outline you're in your career, if you have friends, you have like PT colleagues, and you see them going that direction and they want to make a change, send them this episode, share it, give me a review, let people know the difference, because for a lot of people, they need this in their life. They're heading the direction of like, I'm just going to show up to work. Why not? Let me just try it. And that helps nobody, because our professional reputation drops. And if you realize what's going to be happening over the next, 20, 40 years, as insurance changes, as other professions begin to, overlap with more rehab, and they start to, collaborate more and more, our profession needs to maintain a high reputation. So ultimately, we're trying to do as a whole is maintain that fire, maintain the passion we have for helping people. And when you see people steering the other direction of complacency, it's not helping anyone. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help those people. So I hope that helps wherever you are in your professional career. I am 14 years out this year out of practice. I'm 14 years since graduating from PT school, and I'm still having these thoughts. I'm still working on them. So if you're 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 years out, what's your excuse? Keep pushing the throttle, keep getting better. Nonetheless, I hope that helps wherever you are. Let me know, give me some feedback. Dr. Chris at drchrisgarcia.com. And I hope you guys are doing amazing. I'm hoping to see you on July 23rd, 24th in San Diego, or virtual. I'm doing both, hybrid. And that is the Strength and Conditioning Summit. If you want information, send me an email. If not, I will see you guys on the next episode. All right, guys, take care.